Hi everyone, today we'll be talking about the C clefs. You'll need a good understanding of treble and bass clefs as well as octave designation for this to make sense. If you need help with that, you can watch some of my previous videos. C clefs are movable clefs that can be in different positions on the staff. Alto and tenor are the most common, but we'll look at some other examples as well. Here is alto clef. The important thing to know on any C clef is that where the two curves of the clef come together, that line is middle C or C4. So with alto clef, it's the third line that is middle C. So if we know this is C4, we can easily identify the other lines and spaces. Going down to A3 and F3, and then as we go up to E4 and to G4. Okay, for the spaces, starting with the first space, we have G3, B3, D4, and F4. Now, if you're a viola player, I know you know how to read alto clef. It's the most common usage of alto clef. Let's look at tenor clef. The same idea applies. You'll see the clef looks the same, but it's in a different place on the staff. So now instead of the third line, it's the fourth line that's middle C. We can do exactly the same thing. If this is C4, we can identify our other lines and spaces. This is A3, F3, and D3. And as we go up, we have E4. And our spaces, E3 and G3, B3, and D4. Now you may ask, why do we use these clefs? Is it really important to learn how to read them? They're not as common as treble and bass clef, but I do think it's important, and here's how they're used. As I said a while ago, viola typically reads alto clef, but may switch to treble clef and high passages to avoid ledger lines. So violists may not like reading all those high ledger lines, so they'd switch to treble clef. Bassoon, trombone, and cello typically read bass clef, but may switch to tenor clef and high passages. So if you play one of these instruments, you really need to know how to read both clefs that you're expected to be able to read. And if you're a music theory student or a composer, you need to know how to read these clefs. These are by far the most common uses for the C clefs. A music theory student might be asked to rewrite a passage from one clef to another. So here we have two measures in tenor clef, and we're asked to rewrite it in bass clef. We're not changing the octave. The pitches are exactly the same. We're just writing it in a different clef. I'll play the example. It starts on middle C or C4. We can see that in tenor clef. So I'll write middle C in bass clef. We know that it is one ledger line above. We'll go down to B flat, down to A flat, down to G, and down again to F. And then this is actually an E flat. If we know this is C, there would be C, D, and E. So we have E flat. It's two ledger lines above in bass clef, down to D, and back to middle C. So there we go. That might be a common homework example that you're going to do in theory, or it's something that if you're a middle school or high school orchestra director that you might have to do. You might write it out by hand or use music notation software, but reading or rewriting parts is something that is actually a very useful skill to have. A couple of other things. Let's look at key signatures. My video on key signatures hasn't been released yet. It's upcoming, but I just thought you might like to see what they look like. Nothing is too strange except for tenor clef with sharps. It is different in moving from F sharp to C sharp moves up. It looks a little weird, but that's actually correct. Again, we'll talk more about key signatures as we get into later videos. Here's some other examples of C clefs. Soprano clef, mezzo soprano, and baritone. These are pretty archaic. They're not used much anymore. If you have an old edition of something that has vocal music in it, you might see these clefs. I have an old Dover edition of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony that the last movement with the soloist and the chorus is written using some of these clefs. Modern editions would not use them. I think it would confuse the singers, but you can know if you see them that, again, where the curves of the clef come together, that's middle C or C4. If you need more help with what we've talked about today, I have study notes and a practice quiz that's available in the description of this video. I hope you'll check it out, and I hope you're learning how to think like a musician. I'll see you in the next one.